How many guitars do you really need? That's a question I often hear, as do many other guitar players. And it generally comes from non-guitar players. I mean, how many brushes does a painter need? And how many spices does a chef really need? There's no easy answer to any of these questions. Every guitar sounds different, they play different, and they even smell different. How do you know when it's time to buy a guitar? Let's discuss. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're into guitars, related gear, and hearing how it sounds when we record it, well, perhaps you've come to the right place. Well, we're not recording today, but we are talking about guitars. Now, I don't have the most impressive guitar collection. I'm pretty selective on the instruments that I acquire, so I think that qualifies me to have this discussion because what is the motivation behind buying a guitar? I know some YouTube channels with just walls and walls of guitars, and I can't imagine they even play 10% of what they have. With me, I'm pretty selective. Now, my collection is about 20 guitars, but to be honest, maybe 5 of them, 6 of them are actually serious guitars that I use on a somewhat regular basis. So what I want to do is I want to discuss the motivation behind some of the acquisitions that I made. What was I thinking when I bought it? Did it really serve the need I was hoping it would? Hoping just to give you some things to think about if you're sort of newer in the game, looking to buy your first guitar, second guitar. Maybe you've been in the game for a long time and you have some horror stories to share. I want this to be a discussion because I love talking about guitars. All right, so let's get into the first guitar. So I want to start off with a guitar that I don't play anymore. The headstock broke in 2 places. The body is cracked. It's unplayable, but it's probably the most important guitar in my collection. This Cameo Classical is the first guitar that I ever owned, and it was given to me by my father when I was a kid. Had my first classical lessons on it, and the classical lessons didn't stick. But it started my love for the instrument that hasn't wavered since I started playing. And I have to thank my father for giving me the gift of music. He sadly passed away in May of 2020. And it hangs here as a memory to him. I have his picture here. He's actually playing my number 1, which we'll talk about later in the video. I keep him close to me. He was a big fan of my channel, very encouraging. He used to watch every video the first day they came out and was always the first comment in the comments in the early days of my channel. So I miss him dearly, but this guitar hangs here in memory of my father and really was the seed that became my passion, and that is playing guitar. All right, so let's get into the guitars that are actually playable. This one is very, very important to me. By the way, any guitar that I have featured on the channel, if there's a full-length video, I'll link it in a card above my head somewhere. I'll put a playlist in the description if you want to pick and choose through those. But this one is a Norland era Gibson Challenger II, I believe, circa 1983, 84, that weird Norland era. It's kind of a Les Paul Jr. special-ish kind of thing. It's not all original. Back in the day, tuners were terrible. My guitar teacher sold me these tuners from his Les Paul Custom, and it certainly improved the tuning stability of the guitar. And years later, I actually replaced the pickups there. There was some weird covered pickups. They sounded terrible. So they were humbuckers, but I put Lawler P94s in here. I thought having that P90 style pickup would suit this guitar really well. And that was actually a good upgrade to the guitar. Even changed the speed knobs. But this is what I call the leap of faith guitar. It was my first electric guitar. I had no idea what I liked. If I remember, it was about $200. That's in mid-80s. That's probably $550, $600. Factoring in for inflation here in 2024. But it was a Gibson. I'm a big Rush fan. I saw Lifeson playing his old Gibsons, hollow bodies, Les Pauls, things like that. So right away, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's a Gibson guitar. That first guitar that you get, because like I said, you really don't know what you need because you've never really played that much. I mean, I was playing friends' guitars, acoustic guitar, that old classical guitar that I talked about. So I really didn't know what I liked in terms of an electric guitar, but what I liked about it, it was a Gibson. And I think the most important thing about your first guitar is it needs to motivate you to play. You know, if you get it for the wrong reasons and it just sits there collecting dust, because that happens all the time, unfortunately that would be a wasted purchase. But this one was that leap of faith. I cut my teeth with this guitar. You know, I was in high school, in my first bands, even my first album, or first and only album that I recorded. This was one of the only 2 guitars that I used for that album. And my gigs, it was kind of my backup, but it got to see some gigs and things like that. But I learned how to play guitar, rock guitar on this guitar, and it motivated me enough to keep playing. The leap of faith guitar, if it is your first guitar, try and pick one that excites you and that hopefully it'll continue to excite you. So you'll just keep playing so you can get to your second guitar. So as the third guitar on the list, and we are going chronologically right now, but this is the last time I'm going to maintain this chronological sequence because I do want to bounce around just to keep it interesting. But the first three were significant. The one that got me started, the first electric guitar, but I knew that I wanted more. Now this is a made in Japan Ibanez Roadstar II series. I think it was an RG440. So Ibanez was still making all of their guitars in Japan at the time, and I know Ibanez guitars made in Japan today are much more sought after. I love the sort of oil finish neck here, sort of flat radius, locking nut here, that licensed Floyd Rose on here. Again, being a big Rush fan as I was and watching him during his Fender era with the whammy bars and things like that, I wanted to do that. And for some reason, I wasn't motivated to buy a Fender, but I did see this in a magazine. Marketing is so important thing today. It's all about marketing. But Ibanez had this ad with all of the different colors, and I saw it, and again, I just fell in love with it. But this was a popular model at the time. Ibanez was really making moves. In fact, I didn't like Ibanez before this one. The model year before this one, I thought the guitar was terrible. Even back then, I was like, it's crap. But suddenly with this model year, and I think a lot of people who know Ibanez and the history of Ibanez will probably agree that this was the model that really sent Ibanez on that path to where they are today. It's a great guitar. I mean, the finish on this thing, after all these years, I mean, everything is just working great on this guitar. The only modification that I did on this guitar actually was the pickups. I didn't like the pickups, and on some whim, I put Bill Lawrence OBL pickups in here. And then years later, the push-push pot here failed, so it's now push-pull, which I prefer anyways. And this became my workhorse. When I was in gigging bands, this was my number one guitar. I recorded an album with this. This was the principal guitar that I used for the album. Probably didn't have the best tones in the world. I wish I had a couple of the guitars that I have today. But this was really the guitar that I went and played with my band when I got my first Marshall and my 410 cabinet. And that was sort of the heart of my rig. So this one saw a lot of live use, and it ticked all of the boxes. And all these years later, she's still ticking. So as I go through the list here, I just wanted to share this quick little story because I get a lot of people asking me, in the comments, they've seen a review of a particular guitar and they said, oh, should I get that one or should I get the one with the whammy bar or this pickup or that pickup? And what's the best guitar for me? And the truth is, I have no fucking clue what the best guitar is for you because we all have different needs. I mean, a guitar is such a personal thing, and I really believe you have to try a guitar before you buy it. I mean, in this age of online shopping, we've got Reverb and all those places where you can buy guitars. We salivate over the pictures and we order it. It shows up, and sometimes it's not what we thought it was. It's because you have to play it. And I'll tell you, I was in the market for a modern spec guitar a little while ago, and there was a particular guitar, it doesn't matter the brand, and I just fell in love with this guitar just looking at the pictures online. I was looking at reviews and I was looking at the different finishes. I was like, this is the guitar for me. The problem was none of my local retailers had one in stock. Now, as luck would have it, on a road trip, I popped into some random music store and there it was hanging on the wall. So I was so excited to finally try it. So I reached up, took it off the wall, and I shit you not, it was in my hand like this. I hadn't even played it yet. And I knew that it was the wrong guitar for me. It just didn't feel right, even holding it like this. So all the guitars that I'm showing you today, at some point I had to play them and they're still here for a particular reason. So let's get back into that list. All right, so now we're going out of sequence. We're gonna fast forward to when I turned 50. Wanted to get something very special for my 50th birthday. I almost didn't. And I did a whole video about that as well. I will link that in the description. But this Suhr Classic T Deluxe Limited Edition, wow, this is the most incredible guitar that I own. I'm not necessarily calling it number one, but it's definitely the most well-crafted instrument here in my studio. Also the most expensive guitar that I ever bought. But the motivation behind this was obvious. I was turning 50 and I wanted something special. And I thought originally of getting something vintage, maybe something, in my birth year or something like that. So I went shopping one day with a good friend of mine. I tell this whole story in the video about this guitar. I highly recommend you watch that. After all these years, it's still one of my favorite videos that I've ever done. But this thing was just sitting on the rack beside me. I sat down and I looked over and there it was. And I was obviously struck by this gorgeous finish, this amazing flame top. And anyone who knows Suhr knows that these are some of the finest instruments out there. I mean, the necks on this thing, absolutely stunning. It's almost like glass, this bird's eye roasted maple neck. Stainless steel frets. It's just a stunning guitar. It's not the most versatile guitar I have. It's a Tele, and the type of music that I play, it doesn't always suit everything. So it's not like I'm playing this on every track. But I am in love with this guitar. I would love to get more Suhr guitars. They're not cheap. I've got my eye on a couple. But actually, speaking of Suhr, there was another Suhr model that I wanted to try. Actually, the Ian Thornley T shape that he's got. And I was like, man, that looks really cool. Saw the pictures, and I saw one in the store, and I played it, and I really did not like it. I just didn't like the neck. It was too big. Ian Thornley's known for big fat necks. This one's Slim C, I don't know what they call it. So a little bit of meat on it, but not too much. It just feels really nice in my hands. And you know what? It's just a high-end telly, and it does what a telly does. And I love using it for clean, chimey tones, sort of that single coil, bluesy kind of stuff. And this guitar is definitely a lifer. I'm thrilled with this guitar, and I'll never let this one go. So I wanted to jump into something a little bit wacky. I'm not going to go too deep because I actually haven't reviewed this one yet. That is coming up, so this is like a little teaser. And I actually didn't pay for this one. This was sent to me, but I was actually thinking of buying this because this is a Westcreek double treble. Yes, it's a double neck guitar. I always wanted a double neck guitar, but a Gibson EDS 1275 is a pretty pricey number. And considering it's not something I'm necessarily going to use all the time, I was really intrigued by this. But I recently reviewed another Westcreek guitar, and they were happy enough to send me one of these. So I figure I'd give it a little plug because it is coming soon. But it's a double neck guitar, and it's a lot of fun. All right, so before I get into this very, very important guitar in my collection, I want to ask you, what's your number one? What is it, and why is it your number one? We all have a number one, and I want to hear about your number one. Let me know in the comments. This is my number one. This is a Howard Roberts Fusion 3 from Gibson. It's a semi-hollow. Think if a Les Paul and a 335 had a baby, it would be something like this. Being a big Rush fan, that semi-hollow Gibson, I mean, Alex used a Howard Roberts Fusion. Think sort of exit stage left era. You know, you see him playing Tom Sawyer live with that guitar. Just fell in love with that guitar back in the day. Everything I love about music can be associated with this guitar. It just, you know, sort of that 70s era progressive rock, big hollow body guitars. Obviously, all the stuff that Rush did. Obviously, bands like Yes and things like that as well, Steve Howe. But I just love the sound of this guitar. Love what Alex did with it, and I really wanted one. In fact, I'd love to get the one from his model year, which he sold in an auction with all of his iconic guitars. I really wanted that guitar so bad, but I think it sold for a couple $100,000, so a little bit over my budget. But this is a surprisingly versatile guitar, considering it's, you know, a double humbucker guitar. I think it's the 490 R&T pickups in here, and you know, it does what a dual humbucker guitar does, just with that semi-hollow body, you know, big sound. But while this is a jazz guitar, Howard Roberts was a jazz player, but he was a session player, and also he was known for being really fast. But I just find, for what this guitar is, it's incredibly versatile. I never played real gigs with it, unfortunately. I did play it at my wedding and my sister's wedding, but everything I've recorded since I got it, it became my number one just because it's just everything to me. The neck on it's funny. It's kind of a 59 profile, which I tend to shy away from now. Any guitar that I buy now, I'm looking to go a little bit smaller, not so meaty, but it just still feels great in my hand. Ebony fingerboard on here, and just the aesthetic of this guitar is just beautiful. And this is my number one, and no matter what guitar I buy in the future, this will always be my number one. And again, I want to hear from you. What's your number one? Let me know in the comments. All right, so I've been heaping a lot of praise on a few guitars, and it's time to talk about a stinker. Yes, a stinker. This Les Paul Studio was an idea I had for a project guitar. Now, it was inspired by Alex Lifeson again. In the 1980s, he had this candy apple red Fender Stratocaster with a mirrored pickguard on it. I always thought that was the most awesome thing. And I thought, what if I could do that in a Les Paul? Now, a Les Paul Studio, you know, it's bone structure-wise, it's comparable to your average Les Paul. You don't have the bindings and the beautiful top as you would on a more expensive Les Paul. But the idea is that the bone structure of the Les Paul Studio is on par with your average Les Pauls, right? Just without all the extra appointments. So I thought, what if I got a red one and then just got all the different, you know, appointments, different speed dials, mirrored pickguard, got a chrome tip here, got the chrome Grovers on here, locking tuners on here. And I actually had a Bigsby on here. I since added that string butler. That's another story. But that came later. But the first problem is that the guitar was wrong. It has a massive neck on it, which I just don't like, these baseball bat necks. It doesn't stay in tune. When I had the Bigsby on here, it was horrible. It just wouldn't stay in tune. I eventually, just more recently, got frustrated. I pulled off the Bigsby, and I even got a Seymour Duncan Nazgul in here. I thought, okay, why don't we detune this thing, put some, you know, thicker gauge strings on here, make it a detune guitar, but it just doesn't stay in tune. It doesn't play very well. And it's a shame because I think the project idea was a good one. But when we talk about being impulsive, I bought the wrong guitar. If it was the right guitar, like it was the wrong color. I wanted red. I ended up with this wine color instead of the candy apple red color. And, you know, like I said, the neck is just wrong. And it's a shame because I put a little bit of money into it. The fact that I took off the Bigsby, it looked really cool. I love the look of a Les Paul with a Bigsby on here. And unfortunately, it sits in my studio and doesn't get a lot of use anymore. Maybe one day we'll do something to it or we'll dump it. I'm not really sure, but careful about being impulsive because it rarely pays off, at least with a guitar. Now, as I've stated before, I'm not a big advocate of being impulsive when it comes to buying a guitar. I've been burned. But this was the ultimate impulse buy. I happened to pop into a music store. It was just killing some time, and they were having a blowout sale. So, I thought maybe I'll buy a pedal or something. Anyways, I told the whole story. I did a whole video about this. Of course, I'll link that in the playlist down below. But I did play it. Unlike that other guitar that disappointed me, at least I got my hands on it. But I was just about to leave and I saw it hanging there. A friend of mine loves these guitars. So I thought I'll give it a try. And it just felt really nice in my hands. So, of course, we got the ESP LTD Deluxe Phoenix 1000. Indonesian made Phoenix. And, it felt good enough. It was 50% off. It's like $900 Canadian. It's like $650 US. I mean, it's not a lot of money. This guitar retails for about 1,800 Canadian normally. So I thought, you know what? I had an interesting pickup combination, the Seymour Duncan Custom and the Fat Cat, but I didn't plug it in. That was the thing. I felt it. I played it a little bit. I go, hey, this has got something going on. So I took the plunge and I bought it, brought it home. Man, when I plugged in this thing sounds amazing. And I've had it for about 2 months now, and it's been in almost every video I've done since I bought it. It feels great. It sounds great. This combination of pickups is just stellar. Clean tones. There's a guitar I'm going to talk about next, which I have committed to lower tunings, drop tunings. So I sort of had a bit of a void of something a little higher gain in standard tuning, and suddenly this filled that void. I wanted something because, I didn't want to keep tuning and detuning the other guitar. I had it set up for a drop C. So this Seymour Duncan Custom is a higher output passive humbucker. So it's more higher output than some of my more vintage style pickups I have in other guitars. So it sort of filled that void for the drop D or standard tuning. The Fat Cat being sort of a P90 style pickup, and then the ability to split this humbucker just gives some amazing combination of tones. It sounds great in a high gain amp. It sounds great in a more, pedal platform overdriven kind of amp. It's just getting the job done in a lot of different scenarios. So this was the ultimate impulse buy. Didn't cost me a lot of money, and it's getting the most use. Now, I'm not going to call it my number one. We've already met my number one. But right now, it's getting the most work. So it's in the number one slot right now, and I couldn't be more happy. And considering I didn't pay a lot of money for it, and it was brand new, probably the best impulse buy I've ever made. So apparently I didn't want to talk about this one. I said it was coming up next, and then I blew right through it, and I shut down and realized I forgot to shoot this. I had to set up again. Does this look the same? Anyways, I've talked a lot about this guitar. In fact, I did a whole follow-up on top of the evaluation because I had 3 modern spec guitars. It was a 4-part series, and then I chose this one over 2 other guitars. And then about 8 months later, I did a full follow-up just to talk about how I felt about the guitar after about 8 months, I think it was. And I don't want to go through that whole thing. There's a whole video about that, and will link that below. But the tuners let me down. They were garbage, so I ended up replacing them with Godos. These are great. And the other thing is, the motivating factor about buying this guitar is I wanted something modern spec, detuned, for high gain tones. And I've now committed this to drop C. So it doesn't get as much use as it did as when I first got it when it was in standard tuning, because I keep it in drop C because I've got custom gauge strings. The tension is supposed to be right. But one of my big complaints outside of this is this neck. I love playing it. I mean, this neck through body design with 7-piece neck and body here. It's beautiful and it feels wonderful. But the tuning stability is not as rock solid as I wanted it to be. I chose the hardtail version. People have asked me, should I get the one with the floating bridge? I got the hardtail, this hip shot here, because I wanted a rock solid recording machine that could do high gain stuff. And it's good. It's good, but it's not great. And I'm a little bit disappointed about that. I still love playing it, and I'm not giving up on it. Perhaps another little adjustment here and there. But this neck moves more than I think it should. I mean, it's a really thin neck. I know you Schecter guys who love these necks are saying, it's normal. But I've compared this to other guitars, and this definitely moves a lot more. For a studio, I can kind of sit down and play softly, and I can get through it. But if I was playing live, I think I'd be pulling this thing out of tune constantly. So something to think about. But I mean, a lot of high-end appointments. The Fishman's in here, stainless steel, ebony, Ernie Ball compensated nut. We now have the Godos in there. That's a big upgrade. And just beautiful finish. Nice fade here. Really, really nice. And it's a good guitar. I guess I just wanted it to be great. I was probably more thorough in choosing this guitar than any guitar that I have here in my studio. And it's left me feeling a little bit disappointed, but I still like it. And quick honorable mention, I do play a bit of bass. This one, a guy I used to work with was about to pawn it off. I used to work in music video productions. And we ended up giving him a couple $100 and buried it into the cost of the production. I got to keep it, and I've been playing it ever since. I love this bass. It's just some nondescript Yamaha bass guitar. Seeing as though I'm not primarily a bass player, I've cut my teeth playing bass on this guitar, and all the bass on my channel, most of it anyways, is recorded with this, and I absolutely love it. It's got a good growl to it, gets the job done. More recently, I picked up this 5-string Jackson, kind of impulsive, but just gave me another option on bass. I don't want to cut into my electric guitar budget, so I've pretty got the bases covered. Well, there you have a look at some of the guitars here in my studio and the motivation behind buying them. The moral of the story is you got to try the guitar. You're going to try it at some point. You can order online. Like I said, nothing more disappointing to get that guitar and it just doesn't do it for you. You know, if you're early in your career, you got to take that leap of faith. I get it. But as you learn more and more, you'll know that you need to play them. I mean, this thing was an impulse buy, but at least I did get to try it briefly, and man, certainly couldn't beat the price for this one. And I've used this on virtually every video since I got it. So big win, this one, but it doesn't always go that way. So try the guitars if you can. It is really, really important. Anyways, if you have any thoughts, any questions, I want to hear some of your stories. What's your biggest motivation behind buying that new guitar? I'd love to hear from you. That's what the comments section is for. And if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And while you're down there, well, talked about this guitar. I can tell you the whole story about this guitar, how it sounds, how it plays. I've got a whole video about that. I'll put that right here if you want to check that out. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I'll catch you in the next one.